So we've got really fucked up political landscape, and yeah, it doesn't look to be getting any better anytime soon. So switching from switching from politics and the current state of foreign affair, rock and roll. That's a great transition. All I need is an ad read in the middle, and I'll be golden. I'm a big rock and roll fan, and I tend to listen to a lot of underappreciated artists and underappreciated music. But there are also a lot of more well-known bands, not underground rock bands or underappreciated rock bands or whatever it may be, that I also do really like. There are also a lot of albums that I do like that a lot of people tend to like. And it's just not mainstream because rock and roll's not mainstream. But I like a lot of music. Most of it happens to be rock and roll. I really, really love rock and roll. So what I've done is, now that we are July 28th, 2019, a bare few days until beginning of August of 2019, I have gone down and jotted down 10 must-hear rock albums, with one being an EP. My apologies. But 10 must-hear rock albums or records that I would hope to task you to listen to for August of 2019. My goal with this is fairly simple. Just get you guys to listen to some rock and roll. Get you guys to listen to these albums. So, first album on the list is an album called Thread by a band called I'm sorry. Wow. The album is called Thread by a band called Red Sun Rising, or by the band Red Sun Rising. I think it is a great alternative rock album. I think it's a great alternative rock record. I think the band has come a long way from their debut album. They've got a sound, they've got a presence, they have an identity. I think they're running with it great. The band members seem to believe that the album has done a lot to make them feel like they are a part of a band, not a musical act, but a band. They feel like this is something solid because of this record, and I think it is a great record. The standout songs that I have from it that you probably won't hear too often. Obviously, Death Wish is the biggest one that you'll hear, but I think some of the other great gems of the album are the final track, Evil Like You. I think Clarity is a fantastic song, and I think that songs like Benny Two Dogs and Veins are also great listens if you have the time to kind of delve deep into the lyrics and into the instrumentals and everything. I think it's a really well fleshed out album, and I think it's a great starting point. I mean, the first album was Red Sun Rising, but this is really where Red Sun Rising became Red Sun Rising. This is where they started their identity. So their next album is going to be like their second album. They have to continue with this identity and evolve, but still keep the semblance of what they were from Thread. Second album on the list is I'm Not Well by the band Black Foxes. That's Black Foxes, Foxxes. This was an album that I thought was great for any sort of individual looking for some semblance of mellow rock, some semblance of this dark and gritty and grueling sort of rock. This is an album and a record for people that want to headbang, but also feel like they're entrenched in this pitch black night of rock and roll. I listen to this album and I picture myself in a woodland area in the middle of winter, no leaves on the trees, a puffy jacket on a concrete bench or a concrete stone sort of bench thing beside a stream, a rolling stream with a campfire and camp set up behind me. Just that's what the feeling, the aura of this album gives off. This sort of this sort of this sort of feeling of isolation, this feeling like you're entrenched in isolation, this feeling as though you have society right behind you and you could get up and go to society the second you please, but you choose not to because for right now you like being alone. And when you're ready to go back to society, that's where you start getting entrenched in just the brooding and gritty feel of the album. I think it's a really great, well-rounded album, and I think I just think it's fantastic. Standout songs from me are songs like How We Rust, Maple Summer. I like Bronte. I think Bronte is going to end up being one of those songs that are like criminally underappreciated. And Pines is a good one. I think Slow Jams Forever is a really great sleeper hit. And I think River is just fantastic as well. All around, a really great album for Black Foxes. Next album is Outrage Is Now by the band Death from Above 1979. Now, this is more of an album that I'm not necessarily too big on. I'm not the biggest fan of Death from Above. And I call them Death from Above 1979 because that's what it says on Spotify. So I'm not sure if that's what it says on Apple Music, but I assume most people will probably go and listen to the albums on those platforms. So I'm going to be calling out the name as it's shown on Spotify as of July 2019. I like the sound that Death from Above has. I'm not too infatuated with the music in terms of the fact that I tend to hear the instrumentals as overwhelming the lyrics. So I can't get a full grip on what exactly is supposed to be put forth in this album. But if you want a chaotic sort of guitar all over the fucking place that you just have to hop around to and from, this is the kind of album for you. I think songs like Caught Up and Never Swim Alone, as well as Statues and Moonlight, really just Caught Up to Statues are just great. And then the remainder of the album is more of a taste. You know, you have to have a specific taste for the music. But nevertheless, I think it's a great album that I think people should listen to. The next album is one that I'm not too familiar with. I only had one listen through, but I think it wasn't necessarily my favorite album, but I think it's something that people could enjoy. So if I can bring it to your attention now and you can listen to it, I didn't enjoy it too much, but perhaps you can. It's Are You Real by Beware of Darkness. This is an album that I don't really have much to say on. It just didn't really hit me too much, but I knew it was a well-rounded record. And for what it's worth, if someone can hear me talking about it and someone can go, yeah, you know what? Absolutely. Let's give it a try. And they end up liking it, job done. But I did like Summer Days. That was a good track. I'll admit to that one. Next album is New Skin by CRX, which is, if you're familiar with my professional wrestling work, it is the album in which the song Broken Bones, which was one of the theme songs for Arc Wrestling's Blockbuster show, that was one of this album held one of the theme songs from it. This is an album that I think you will listen to, and at times you will feel the need to bounce off of the walls, and on other times you feel the need to just slide across the floor and just kind of be free. Like you could be in a big room surrounded by walls, but you could just run around and jump around. It's an extremely energetic track that I think you could feel at home too. Just imagine the walls are bright fucking pink. You're wearing a bright pink leather jacket because that's the album cover. So I thought of pink for like the color pink first. I think wearing a pink leather jacket, pink shoes or boots or something like that, and pink walls, and just running about. It screams vibrance. The standout songs for me on this are obviously songs like Broken Bones. Anything is a fun one. I think Slow Down is a really great track that is going to be overlooked. Give It Up is another one that I really hope they end up turning into a single. On Edge is fun, and Ways to Fake It is another good one. Walls is really great. I think the entire album is really great, and I think it's very well worth a listen. The next album is really just an EP. It's the 1981 extended play by I Don't Know How, But They Found Me, or in short, IDK How. However, when you look it up on Spotify and perhaps Apple Music as well, the album will say I Don't Know How, But They Found Me. So this is obviously the project that Ryan Seaman from, I believe, Falling in Reverse and Dallin Weekes from Panic at the Disco created. It is a really great 80s, not 80s rock sound. It's a great aesthetic album. It screams, every song you hear screams modern day, but at the same time, it also screams this could absolutely fly as great in the 80s. It is a fantastic track. It is exactly what the group is going for with this 80s aesthetic. Obviously, you're going to hear songs like Choke and Do It All the Time and Absinthe. I think my favorite album on the entire record would probably be Absinthe, but right behind it would probably be Social Climb, just because I think it has something about it. Coming some hearts now. This whole kind of feel that Dallin Weekes is trying to portray is very different from the remainder of the album, which I think is just fantastic. I think it's a record. I think it's a great record to listen to, and it's probably it's probably the easiest record to listen to off of this entire list due to its length in nature. Now, when it comes down to the 7th album, this is this is what I was saying earlier. This is a band that isn't necessarily unknown or anything like that, and it's not like you have to go through the trenches to find them. It's Revelations by Audioslave. They're one of my favorite bands, and I really do enjoy Chris Cornell. This is the final album the band released. It is also the first and only Audioslave album that Chris Cornell wrote while sober, which makes it a lot more legible and intelligible than the original Audioslave self-titled album and Out of Exile were. It has some great tracks. One of my favorite songs of all time that is also one of the most underlooked songs in my mind is Wide Awake, which, on the surface just sounds like a plea for someone to, without listening to the lyrics or listening too far into the lyrics. It's a song that you hear and it sounds like somebody pleading to wake up from this nightmare and go back to sleep into a dream. But then you look further into the lyrics and you understand the reasoning. It's this whole kind of sentencing of the Bush administration for their failures to do anything of note for and to New Orleans and the victims of Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. I've found you guilty. I've found you guilty of the crimes of sleeping at a time when you should have been wide awake. It's a great song that perfectly ushers the entire album. It is Chris Cornell's obviously only sober work in Audioslave, but it is a great sober work. And then obviously the title track, Revelations, is fantastic. I think it's full of energy. Tom Morello is one of my favorite guitar players, and he just, the fact that, his over-reliance on, I call it the whammy bar. It may have another name. I've heard people refer it to something else. I can't think of what they refer to it, no matter what the case may be. But Tom Morello and his over-reliance on that motherfucking bar, I love. He's one of my favorite guitarists, and the fact that his guitar playing meshed so well with Chris Cornell's clean, smooth vocals and understandable lyrics and coherent lyrics, if we're being honest with ourselves, is it just makes Revelations feel special, right? Because the original Audioslave album sounded like a masterpiece. It had its flaws, but it was the rough outline for a masterpiece. Out of Exile sounded like a magnum opus. Revelations was like the warm, fuzzy feeling album where you can be happy knowing that everyone was in the right stage of mind making this album. Everybody was happy making this album. It was the final album before they went off and did their own thing, so they ended off on a good note. And Revelations it's a nice soft spot in the discography of Audioslave. Obviously, songs like Sound of a Gun or Some Days is pretty underrated. Moth is fantastic. Son of a Gun is fantastic. Nothing Left to Say But Goodbye is also amazing. One and the same. Every song on this album has its beauty, and it's a great record. Very highly suggested. The next album is one that you probably wouldn't expect from me because it's so out of. But if you thought Audio Slave's Revelations or Outrages Now stood out from the list, this kind of puts it in place. It's Strength in Numbers by Fever 333. It's written as Strength in Numb, and with numbers being spelled capital NUMB 333RS. The threes are obviously the number 3. It is a really, just gonna be honest, a really well-rounded rap rock album. It's one of the few rap rock albums that I actually do enjoy. One of the few rap rock records that I really do enjoy. I think Fever 333, with the element of rap and rock, could be a mainstream fixture in music. As much as I hate saying that term, mainstream fixture, they could end up being that with their music and the way it sounds, the way it's written, and the way people take to it. I think it's just a really great record, and I think if you were looking for something that brings out your animalistic instinct, the intro track, which is just the comma ... followed by Burn It, which it leads right into Burn It, is a great track. Pray For Me is another one, but it's spelled Prey for me. Inglewood is another great one. Out of Control is a really good one. Coup d'etat is or Coup d'etat, or whatever the fuck however you would pronounce it. The final album, or the final song on the album, is also amazing. One of Us is a really good one. Animal is really good. It's just a really great, well-rounded record, and I would say probably Pray For Me and Coup d'etat, or however you would pronounce the final song on the album, are probably the two standouts when it comes down to it. The next album is Axiom by Dead Poets Society. It's a shorter album, but it is an album nonetheless. I believe it takes up 24 minutes, and it was released 4 years ago. So the album is a classic hard-hitting rock album with an alternative rock feel. You listen to it and you feel like you're behind the seat or behind the wheel of a car that's on an open road with absolutely nothing to crash into. It's a straight shot, and you're speeding. There's no limit on how fast you can go. You gradually increase every single moment your foot is down on the pedal. It's a great rock song to lose yourself in the moment of. Feel like the wind is blowing through your hair. The two standouts on the album are Seen Fine and Sound and Silence. I think those are great. But also songs like Sutton and Be Here are also standouts. Really great album. Dead Poet Society is again, as I've said so many times prior, so severely underrated. But yeah, really great album. And the final album, of course, if you couldn't tell already by just my infatuation with the band over the past few months, is Okay, I'm Sick by Bad Flower, which I think I think the album could go down as one of the best rock albums of the decade. I have that feeling. Sure, there are duds like Die, which is very much politically focused. Obviously, there are other elements to it, but the anti-Trump aspect, which I don't have a problem with. Listen, you can be anti-Clinton, anti-Trump. I don't give a shit. Be anti-whatever you are. The beautiful thing about your stance is that not everyone agrees with you, and sometimes no one agrees with you, which means that your opinion is more unique than someone that has an opinion that everyone agrees with. And if no one agrees with you, I mean, most oftentimes it means you have the wrong opinion, but nevertheless, you have an opinion that adds to the amount of opinions out there. Die is a little, in my opinion, and in my view, just a little too overplayed. Not like they overplay it, but as in the concept of the song, the reasoning for the song, the message in the song, the political in nature aspect of the song is just too overplayed. You've got too many people talking and hating Trump in so many different things just kind of branch out. Not to mention when you become political about something that is, in the moment, you just begin to date the song, and and you start dating the album when you make an album out of that. I love Wide Awake. It's great, but it's still a song about a topic that was relevant in 2005, but not in 2019, right? Chris Cornell is dead. The remainder of Audioslave, obviously the lead singer, Chris Cornell, is dead, and the remainder of his band are now in another group called Prophets of Rage. And it's, 12 years removed from their last album? Very dated kind of song. While it has a brilliant way to be enjoyed, it's still a dated song. Same can be said for Die, which I think is the only truly weak spot on the album. I think Murder Games, even despite the fact that it opens up with the same kind of instrumental that 24 opened up with, I think it brings up a nature of violence that the album needed in the second half, especially following songs like Promise Me, Daddy, which are two kind of more poppy, radio-friendly rock songs, or at least the more poppy songs on the album. And then 24 and Heroin, which both have the kind of like softer moments in which it doesn't always evolve. It sometimes goes back and falls down into a more soothing sort of feel. And then Die is just a rush of everything. But Murder Games kind of brings everything into a very loud, constantly growing and never going down from loud to soft again, then back to loud, and it doesn't date itself. So it's like the perfect kind of, it's what Die should have been. And then Girlfriend is just fantastic. Wide Eyes is great, and Cry is a fantastic album closer. Exactly what you want out of an album closer. Ghost is obviously the song that everybody talks about, as well as Jester being the band's staple. I think Xanax or X Anna X is another great song that, holy fuck, kicks out the album. Really just great. It's a fantastic track that doesn't play to any sort of standards or any sort of same thing, as in like verse chorus doesn't play into any patterns. It's just chaotic in nature, which is a fantastic way to open up this album in specific. Not every album, but this album in specific. We're in Love is also a great predecessor to Promise Me, which I think is going to be the most underrated song out of the entire album. It somehow manages to be pop rock without feeling too much like pop, like it's overdoing it into pop, but also being a pop rock song you can just throw yourself around a room to. I think it's fantastic. Daddy is such a beautifully dark song. It has sweet little girl with nothing to say. She hides in the smile. She wears on her face. This sort of kind of like this not fairy tale. This nursery rhymes almost sort of sound to it, with this dark, secret, not secret really, but dark message of the song, where it's like this shit, Christ alive, what's the lyric? Not against my eyes, so you get the point. But it's very uplifting, upbeat sort of song, with the message of the song being a daughter being sexually abused by her father, growing up and eventually killing him by suffocating him. And her life goes down the tubes because she killed the dude as he was on his hospital bed ready to die. So he died having lived with that and facing that and whatever afterlife comes about. And she's now imprisoned for murdering her ill father, even with the backstory it may be, and what their lives could have been had he just not done so. That is probably the best, I would say, the best song on the album in relation to hitting all of the nails on the head in terms of instrumentals, lyrics, the message, the meaning, the impact, the oomph, and the darkness, whilst also having the light simultaneously. I think it's a great song. I think it's a fantastic album. And aside from, if Die wasn't there dating the album and making it, this is 2016 to 2020. This is Trump era. excuse me. I think he mentions Trump in general in this, or like just outright in the song, which again dates it. I may be wrong, but would still date it nonetheless. But had Die not been in there and they replaced it with something like Move Me or I think Bloody Mary, what was the song? Or Soap or what was it? White Tail or fuck, what was it? White Noise. There you go. If they replaced it with White Noise, the album I think would be the best of the decade. It's just so fantastic. It's all well rounded and it's all the band's debut album. You couldn't hit the nail on the head more. I mean, that's Linkin Park Hybrid Theory levels of hitting the nail on the head first try. May not be best for everybody, may not be what everybody likes, but it's undeniable that you managed to strike gold in your first swing, right? That's hard to do, much less in this rock climate and amidst such great underappreciated rock music. This album, Okay, I'm Sick, stands out amongst everything else. And if anything, I really do hope it ends up being one of the albums we look back at and go, hell yeah, that was one of the best albums the entire decade saw. I think it's great, and it's a great way to close off this list. Wouldn't you say? So I think, I mean, obviously you can bring in plenty of other albums, but those are the ones that I think go under the ground. Obviously, Audio Slave, Revelations pales in comparison to the debut, self-titled debut, because of Like a Stone and Coach Eyes, but yeah, all those albums I think are fantastic, and that album, Bad Flowers, Okay, I'm Sick, made me a lifelong fan of them, just off of its impact. Again, one of the best albums of the decade. Very, very glad that that's what closes off the list.